had 68 hours to find a husband or lose everything to the cousin who'd put me in this wheelchair. The Bellagio's lounge spun around me, champagne, laughter, slot machines screaming jackpot while I hunted for someone morally flexible enough to marry a stranger. Desperate enough to say yes to a woman in a wheelchair with no time for explanations. That's when I saw him, alone, predatory, watching the room like he was counting everyone's secrets. His suit cost more than my car. His eyes promised violence. When I wheeled up and said, "I need a husband for 72 hours. Name your price," he smiled like I'd just made his night interesting. 96 hours earlier, I'd sat in a different kind of throne room. Harrison and McKee occupied the 14th floor of a building that smelled like old money and older secrets. The conference room was all dark mahogany and judgmental oil paintings of dead white men who'd probably screwed over their families too. I'd wheeled myself in at 2 p.m. sharp. My stomach knotted with dread I couldn't name yet. The reading itself was theater. Gregory Harrison, silver-haired, three-piece suit. Voice like a funeral dirge made us wait while he arranged papers with ceremonial precision. Around the table, my family circled like vultures who'd spotted something dying. Derek sat directly across from me, already leaning back in his chair like he owned it. He'd worn his respectful mourning face, the one that fooled everyone except me. Beside him, Aunt Maureen was working on her third gin and tonic, mascara already smudging. Various distant relatives I'd seen maybe twice in my life filled the other seats, checking phones, whispering, waiting for the money shot. To my granddaughter, Wilma Catherine Stone, Harrison read, "I leave the entirety of my estate, properties, and business holdings." The room went electric. Derek's chair legs hit the floor, provided she enters into a legally binding marriage within 72 hours of this will's reading. The silence was spectacular. Should Wilma fail to meet this condition, Harrison continued, his voice carefully neutral, all assets transfer in full to Derek Michael Stone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Marriage? 72 hours? The room erupted. Maureen was shrieking about disrespect. Distant cousins were already calculating their losses. Derek said nothing, but his smile was slow and poisonous. The meeting ended in chaos. I was still sitting there, paralyzed, when everyone filed out. That's when Derek doubled back. He closed the door quietly, leaned against it. The conference room suddenly felt very small. 72 hours, he said conversationally. That's not a lot of time to find someone willing to marry a... He paused, eyes dropping deliberately to my wheelchair. Well, you know, the word he didn't say hung in the air like smoke. Who's going to marry you, Wilma? The nurse who changed Grandpa's bedpans felt sorry enough to be nice. But marriage? His laugh was soft, almost kind. Worse than cruelty. Face it, you're going to lose everything, and I'm going to enjoy watching it happen. He left. I sat there for another 10 minutes, rage building like pressure in a sealed container. Then I pulled out my phone and booked a flight to Vegas, which brought me here. To this moment, to this man. Up close, he was even more dangerous than he'd looked from across the room. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, a mouth that curved with controlled amusement. His whiskey sat untouched on the bar, condensation pooling on the marble. 72 hours, he repeated, his voice low and smooth. That's specific. Inheritance clause, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need a legal marriage certificate by Thursday at 2 p.m. or I lose everything. Everything, he echoed, like he was tasting the word. And what exactly is everything? Enough. My hands were sweating on the wheelchair grips. Look, I can pay you. 20,000 now. Another 30 when it's done. The marriage doesn't have to be, we don't have to. I was drowning in my own awkwardness. It's purely transactional. He studied me for a long moment. Those calculating eyes moved over my face, my wheelchair, back to my face. I waited for the pity, the discomfort, the polite refusal. Instead, he smiled. I don't want your money, he said. My heart sank. Then, but I'll marry you. The casino noise seemed to fade. What? He extended his hand. Lionel Lambert, and you are Wilma. I took his hand, his grip was warm, firm, certain. Wilma Stone. Something flickered across his expression. Too quick to read. Well, Wilma Stone, you've got yourself a husband. It was too easy, too smooth. Every instinct I had screamed that this was wrong, that I should ask more questions, that no one agrees to marry a stranger without wanting something in return. But I had 68 hours and no other options. We shook on it. The deal was struck. I didn't know yet that I'd just proposed to the man my family had spent 3 generations trying to destroy. I didn't know that Lionel Lambert wasn't just any dangerous stranger, he was the dangerous stranger. The one name that could make my grandfather's ghost rise from the grave in fury. I didn't know that by Thursday at 2 p.m., I wouldn't just inherit my grandfather's estate. I'd inherit his war. The Chapel of Eternal Love, and yes, that was its actual name, looked exactly like what happens when Vegas and a fever dream have a baby at 2 a.m. Neon pink hearts blinked in the window. Plastic roses in colors nature never intended lined the aisle. An Elvis impersonator in full rhinestone regalia waited at the altar, his expression suggesting he'd married stranger couples and asked fewer questions. "Dearly beloved," Elvis began, his voice a perfect baritone. "We are gathered here tonight. Can we skip to the legally binding part?" Lionel interrupted, his hand steady on my wheelchair handle. Elvis didn't even blink. "Works for me, sweetheart. Do you, Lionel Lambert, take this woman?" "I do." "And do you, Wilma Stone, take this man?" "Yes." My voice cracked. "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Nevada and the spirit of rock and roll, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride or not. I don't judge." Lionel leaned down. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he'd actually kiss me. Instead, his lips barely brushed my temple, a ghost of contact that somehow felt more intimate than anything else. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lambert," he murmured. The rings were simple gold bands from the chapel's display case, probably worn by 100 desperate couples before us. When Lionel slid mine on, his touch was surprisingly gentle, his fingers steady where mine shook. We signed the certificate at a desk decorated with Cupid stickers. My signature looked drunk. Lionel's was confident, controlled. As I watched him write his name in efficient black ink, something shifted in his expression. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but calculation. Cold and precise, like he was solving an equation I couldn't see. For a split second, terror washed over me. What had I just done? Who had I just married? Then Elvis handed us our certificate in a folder decorated with glitter hearts. The moment passed, and we were legally bound. The Bellagio suite was all cream marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip. It was beautiful. It was romantic. It was absolutely suffocating. Lionel locked the door behind us. 3 locks, I noticed, including a deadbolt, and immediately poured 2 whiskeys from the minibar. He handed me one without asking if I wanted it. "We should establish ground rules," he said. My heart hammered. This was it. The part where he'd expect, where he'd demand. "You take the bed." He gestured to the massive king-size monstrosity. "I'll take the couch." I stared at him. "What?" "The bed," he repeated, loosening his tie. "It's yours. I don't." He paused, something almost human flickering across his expression. "I'm not a monster, Wilma. Whatever else I am, I'm not that." The relief nearly broke me, but it was the confusion that lingered, spreading through my chest like slow poison. Who was Lionel Lambert? And why did his unexpected decency feel more dangerous than any threat he could have made? We walked into Harrison and McKee at exactly 2:14 p.m. on Thursday, 14 minutes past the deadline that had ruled my life for 3 days. Derek was already there, practically vibrating with anticipation. His smile died the second he saw Lionel pushing my wheelchair through the door. "No," the word came out strangled. "No, that's not, you can't." "Marriage certificate," Lionel said smoothly, producing the glitter heart folder from his jacket. "Legal, binding, signed by Elvis himself." Gregory Harrison examined the document with the thoroughness of a man who desperately wanted to find a problem and couldn't. The silence stretched. Derek's face progressed through several shades of red I didn't know human skin could achieve. "The marriage is valid," Harrison finally announced. "Miss Stone, Mrs. Lambert, has fulfilled the conditions of the will." Derek exploded. "This is fraud. She can't just marry some random. Who even are you?" "Her husband," Lionel said. His smile was knife-sharp. "Lionel Lambert, pleased to meet you." Something flickered across Derek's expression. Recognition. Fear. Then rage swallowed it whole. Harrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lambert, there's a second envelope." He produced a thick manila package, sealed with red wax. "Your grandfather specified this was to be opened only after your marriage was confirmed." My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside were documents, pages and pages of corporate structures, property deeds, financial statements. I started reading. Then I couldn't stop. The Stone Casino holdings. Protection contracts with language that made my stomach turn. Shipping manifests for goods that definitely weren't legal. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. Numbers with so many zeros they looked fictional. $347 million. I don't understand. My voice sounded distant, disconnected. Grandfather owned art galleries. He collected antiques. He was a criminal, Derek said flatly. And you just inherited his empire. Congratulations. The room spun. Every dinner, every birthday, every hospital visit while I recovered from the fall. Grandpa had sat beside my bed, holding my hand, reading me poetry, and he'd been running a criminal syndicate the entire time. He kept you out of it because of that. Derek gestured dismissively at my wheelchair. Thought you were too fragile, too vulnerable, a liability. The word hit like a slap. You think you can actually run this? Derek's laugh was ugly. You can't even walk. You're dead within a week, Wilma. And when you are... His eyes slid to Lionel with something calculating and cold. Well, accidents happen. He stormed out, but his confidence lingered like smoke. He wasn't worried. He was certain. Lionel's hand found my shoulder. Breathe. I looked up at him. This stranger I'd married. This man whose last name I'd just learned. Who are you? His expression was unreadable. Right now, I'm the only person in this room who can keep you alive. Lionel's penthouse occupied the top floor of a building that probably had its own zip code. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the strip like a throne room surveying conquered territory. He'd insisted we come here instead of my apartment. Safer, he'd said, which should have been my first clue. I locked myself in the guest bedroom and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The first search result made my stomach drop. The second made my blood turn to ice. By the third, I couldn't breathe. Lionel Lambert, alleged head of Las Vegas crime syndicate. Photos of him in expensive suits at funerals. Stone family funerals. My Uncle Richard. My cousin Sophie. A headline from 3 years ago. Lambert Stone War claims another victim. Another. Blood feud continues. Stone Casino bombed. 3 dead. I scrolled through images. Lionel shaking hands with politicians. Lionel leaving courthouses. Lionel at my family's funerals. Standing in the back like a predator counting casualties. My grandfather's greatest enemy. And I'd married him. I found him in the living room. Phone pressed to his ear. Speaking rapid fire in what sounded like Russian or maybe Korean. His back was to me. Shoulders tense. Voice cold and commanding. This was a different man than the one who'd taken the couch. Who'd slid a ring on my finger with surprising gentleness. This was the monster. He ended the call. I threw my phone at his head. He caught it without turning around. I was wondering when you'd Google me. You're Lionel Lambert. My voice shook with rage. The Lionel Lambert. You knew exactly who I was when I proposed. He turned slowly, my phone still in his hand. Yes. You knew about the inheritance, about my family, about... The betrayal choked me. This was all planned. Not all of it. He set my phone on the marble counter, his movements careful. I did need to get married. My family's bylaws archaic, ridiculous, but binding. State I can't assume full control without a wife. His smile was bitter. When you wheeled up to me in that casino and proposed, I thought it was fate, or strategy. Strategy? I thought you knew what you were inheriting. I thought this was some elaborate stone play. Marry the enemy, unite the families, consolidate power. He laughed, sharp and humorless. I didn't know you were completely clueless about your own empire. I'm not clueless. I was lied to. And I didn't lie to you, he interrupted. I just didn't volunteer information you never asked for. That's the same thing. Is it? He moved closer, predatory. You needed a husband. I needed a wife. We both got what we wanted. I wanted a temporary arrangement. Well, you got a permanent one. His voice went cold. We're bound now, Wilma. Legally, criminally, irrevocably. You can't divorce me without triggering succession clauses that would tear both our families apart. And I can't divorce you without losing everything I've built. The trap snapped shut around us both. So what now? I whispered. Lionel's expression was unreadable. Now? We figure out how to survive being married to our greatest enemy. 3 days of hostile silence felt like 3 years. We circled each other in the penthouse like wolves in a cage, Lionel working his phone in the study, me researching my newly inherited crime empire in the guest room, both of us pretending the other didn't exist. Then someone tried to kill us. The parking garage was concrete and shadows, and the lingering smell of exhaust. Lionel's bodyguard, Oscar, built like a refrigerator with better suits, was opening the car door when he froze. "Don't move." His voice was deadly calm. "Nobody move." He crouched beside Lionel's Mercedes, phone flashlight illuminating something underneath. "Bomb. Professional job. We need to go. Now." The service elevator had never seemed farther away. Oscar hauled me in my wheelchair like I weighed nothing. Lionel right behind us. And then the world exploded. The shockwave hit as the elevator doors closed, slamming us against the back wall. Heat and sound and my ears ringing like church bells on Sunday. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Henderson that smelled like dust and forgotten furniture. Oscar's hands were burned minor, but painful. I found the first aid kit, while Lionel worked 3 phones simultaneously, barking orders in multiple languages. "Hold still." I cleaned Oscar's burns with steady hands, applying antibiotic ointment with the precision my mother had taught me during her nursing career. "2nd degree. You'll blister, but you'll live." Oscar stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're very calm for someone who almost died. Panicking won't unexplode the car." I wrapped his hands in gauze. "Besides, I've had worse Thursdays." Lionel ended his call, something dangerous flickering across his expression. "Oscar, pull up the garage footage." The security feed showed everything. A figure in a maintenance uniform, moving with purpose, sliding under the Mercedes. The timestamp showed he'd planted the bomb exactly where we'd both be standing. Driver's side for Lionel, passenger side where Oscar would lift me in. "Freeze it," Lionel commanded. "Zoom in." The face came into focus. I recognized him immediately, one of Derek's men, the one who'd smirked at me during the will reading. "Derek," I breathed. "He's not trying to take your empire," Lionel said slowly, pieces clicking together. "Or mine. He wants both destroyed." The realization hit like ice water. The family bylaws. If we kill each other, assets liquidate, distributed to surviving family members. Lionel's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Your cousin is betting on mutual destruction. He engineers our deaths, makes it look like the Lambertstone War finally consumed both heirs, and he inherits the ashes." "The marriage wasn't a complication to his plan," I whispered. "It was the centerpiece." Lionel met my eyes across the dingy safe house. "He's counting on us destroying each other." Oscar looked between us, understanding dawning. "So what do we do?" I smiled, sharp and cold. "Disappoint him." The Stone family compound perched in the Vegas hills like a fortress pretending to be a home. 23 relatives gathered in the dining room, crystal chandeliers, imported Italian marble, and enough tension to choke on. This was my debut as both heir and Lionel's wife, and every eye tracked us like we were dinner theater. Lionel's hand rested on my wheelchair handle, possessive and protective. We'd choreographed this, the casual touches, the shared glances, the way he leaned down to whisper in my ear like we shared secrets instead of a forced alliance. "They're watching," he murmured, his breath warm against my temple. "Let them watch." I reached up, threading my fingers through his with practiced ease. Aunt Maureen looked like she'd swallowed glass. Uncle Richard's wife kept glancing between us like she was witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Distant cousins whispered behind wine glasses, but none of them could find cracks in our performance. Then Derek stood, champagne flute raised, smile venomous. "A toast," he announced, "to Wilma and Lionel. May their love last longer than a Vegas marriage usually does." Polite laughter rippled through the room. "And may they both get exactly what they deserve." The threat was unmistakable. Later he cornered me near the powder room, his cologne suffocating in the narrow hallway. "He'll kill you," Derek whispered. "It's what Lamberts do to stones. It's in his blood." He leaned closer. "And when he does, I'll make sure you're remembered as the naive cripple who trusted the wrong man." Something inside me snapped. I wheeled past him, back into the dining room, straight to the head of the table where my grandfather used to sit. The conversations died. 23 pairs of eyes locked on me. "I have an announcement." My voice cut through the silence like broken glass. As the sole heir to the Stone estate, I'm making my first executive decision. I pulled out the folder Lionel's people had compiled: bank statements, wire transfers, offshore accounts. Derek has been stealing from the family for 3 years. $2 million, siphoned through fake vendor accounts. I let the papers fall onto the white tablecloth. "These are the receipts." The room erupted. Derek's face went white, then red, then a shade of purple that looked medically concerning. "You're exiled," I continued, my voice cold and clear. "From this family, From this business, from this house. You're nothing now, and if you come near me or my husband again, you won't just lose your inheritance. You'll lose everything." Derek stood frozen, rage and disbelief warring across his expression. Then he smiled slow, poisonous, promising violence. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "It is." He left, but his confidence lingered like a curse. He wasn't defeated. He was just getting started. Lionel's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. Not for show, for real. Derek's retaliation came like wildfire, fast, vicious, and everywhere at once. 3 stone warehouses burned within an hour. 2 Lambert casinos reported shootings. 5 people dead, a dozen wounded, and every piece of evidence pointed to mutual attack. Phone calls flooded in from both families, demanding blood, screaming for war. "He's orchestrating chaos," Lionel said, staring at the reports covering his desk. "Making it look like we're attacking each other. Then we stop playing his game." I wheeled closer, scanning the intelligence reports. "Where's he coordinating from?" We combined everything: Lionel's surveillance network, my family's financial tracking, Oscar's street-level contacts. I'd spent the last week learning the business my grandfather had hidden from me, and now I put that knowledge to work. Tracking shell companies, following money trails, connecting dots no one else saw. "You're good at this," Lionel said, watching me work at 3 a.m., surrounded by laptops and documents. Turns out being underestimated my whole life meant I learned to pay attention. I highlighted another connection. "People talk around wheelchairs like we're furniture." He was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask about it? The wheelchair?" My hands stilled on the keyboard. I'd never told anyone the truth. But something about the darkness, the exhaustion, the way we'd become partners in survival, it loosened the words. Derek pushed me. The admission felt like swallowing glass. 5 years ago. Top of the marble staircase at grandfather's house. Everyone called it an accident. I was too afraid to say otherwise. I met Lionel's eyes. He visited me in the hospital, leaned close while I was drugged and helpless, and whispered, "You should have stayed down." Lionel's expression transformed into something terrifying. Rage so pure and cold it was like watching violence take human form. "I'm going to kill him. Get in line." The warehouse sat on the edge of town, abandoned except for Derek's activity. We found it through a combination of traffic cameras and financial records. He'd purchased it through a shell company 3 months ago, planning this long before I'd even inherited. Inside, we found his war room. Photographs covered the walls, every key player in both families, connected by red string like a serial killer's trophy collection. Names crossed out in black marker, dates, methods. He'd been planning a massacre. "He's not trying to take over," I breathed, horror washing over me. "He's trying to eliminate everyone and rebuild from zero." "A clean slate," Lionel agreed, his voice deadly quiet. "His own empire, no legacy, no history." How very ambitious of him. We both spun. Derek emerged from the shadows, flanked by 8 armed men who definitely weren't on any family payroll. Professional killers, bought and paid for. "I knew you'd find this place," Derek said, smiling. "I left just enough breadcrumbs. You're both so predictable, thinking you're smarter than everyone else." The men spread out, surrounding us. Lionel moved in front of my wheelchair, his body a shield. Oscar materialized from somewhere behind us, gun drawn, but we were outnumbered 3 to 1. "Last chance to stay down, Wilma," Derek said, raising his weapon. I smiled, cold and sharp. "I told you. I don't stay down anymore." Derek's gun stayed level with my head, his smile poisonous with triumph. "Let me explain how this ends. I've been feeding information to the FBI for 6 months, every operation, every transaction, every dirty secret. I'm the hero who brings down both crime families." He laughed. "Once you two kill each other, and you will, it's in your blood, I walk away with immunity and 400 million in offshore accounts." "Clever," Lionel said, voice deadly calm. "I thought so." Derek's attention shifted to me, contempt dripping from every word. "You were always weak, Wilma. That's why grandfather never told you about the business. You're a liability in a wheelchair. A cripple playing at being a queen." The old shame tried to surface. I pushed it down, replaced it with cold fury. "You're right," I said softly. "I am in a wheelchair." Derek's smile widened, thinking he'd won. "Which means you only ever see the chair." I smiled back razor sharp. "You never see me. I triggered the device hidden in my watch. The warehouse exploded with movement. Lionel's security team crashed through every entrance. 12 men, heavily armed, tactical precision. Stone family soldiers poured in from the east side, Lambert enforcers from the west. Both families, united, overwhelming. Derek's hired guns in seconds. Derek's face went white. That's impossible. Your FBI contact? Lionel's voice was conversational. Special Agent Wilson? He's been on my payroll for 3 weeks. Every word you said has been recorded, Derek. Every confession. Every plan. We've been listening the whole time, I added. You monologued your way into a life sentence. Chaos erupted. Derek's men dropped weapons, surrendering fast. But Derek, stupid, arrogant Derek, lunged for me. Rage obliterating reason. I'd been waiting for this moment for 5 years. He reached for my throat. I grabbed his wrist, using his momentum and my wheelchair's weight to pivot hard. Upper body strength earned through years of physical therapy became a weapon. Derek flew over my chair, crashing into metal shelving with a satisfying crunch. I survived you once, I said, looking down at him. I'm not the scared girl anymore. Lionel hauled Derek up by his collar, violence barely contained. Wilma's decision. She chooses how this ends. Every eye in the warehouse turned to me. Both families, waiting. This was my moment, my first real act as the stone heir. Death would be mercy, I said clearly. He doesn't deserve mercy. Turn him over to Agent Wilson, with all the evidence. Let him rot in federal prison, knowing he lost to the cripple he tried to destroy. Derek screamed as they dragged him away. You're dead, both of you. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. 1 year later, the penthouse had transformed from a battleground into a home. The strip glittered below us, both families' operations now running under legitimate corporate structures. Mostly legitimate, anyway. Some traditions die hard. Do you regret it? Lionel asked, bringing me coffee on the balcony. That desperate proposal in a casino at midnight? I looked at my husband. Truly my husband now, not by convenience but by choice. I proposed to a stranger and accidentally married my soulmate. That's the most Vegas thing that's ever happened. He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Then he kissed me not for cameras, not for show, but because we'd chosen each other when we could have destroyed each other instead. The wheelchair was visible in every press photo, every business meeting, every public appearance. I refused to hide it. The business world had learned fast. Underestimating Wilma Lambert was the last mistake you'd make. In the boardroom, I sat at the head of the table, Lionel at my right hand. Our wedding rings caught the light symbols of the alliance that had transformed 2 warring empires into an unstoppable force. Stone Lambert Enterprises reports are ready, Oscar announced, setting down folders. I smiled at Lionel. He smiled back. We'd merged more than businesses, we'd merged legacies, rewritten history, proved that the girl everyone dismissed could become the most dangerous person in Vegas. Not despite the wheelchair, because I'd weaponized everyone's assumptions about it. Turns out, I said, scanning the quarterly reports, inheriting a crime, empire, and marrying your enemy is the easy part. Learning to share power? That's the real challenge. Lionel's hand found mine under the table. Good thing you've always loved a challenge. Good thing I married someone who can keep up. The girl who'd been invisible her whole life had become impossible to ignore, and the man who'd been called a monster had found someone who saw past the violence to the human underneath. We'd started as enemies forced into alliance. We'd become partners who chose each other every single day, and Vegas would never be the same. If you enjoyed Wilma and Lionel's story of revenge, redemption, and accidentally falling for your greatest enemy, smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling romance stories where underdogs become unstoppable. Drop a comment below. What did you think of Wilma's transformation? And what would you want to see in part 2? More family drama? Business empire building? Or maybe the honeymoon they never got to have? Let me know your thoughts.